Thank you for doing that. I wanted to be sure that I gave each person maybe five to 10 minutes to talk a little bit about their career journey and what they do. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see who our speakers are. All right, so for our panel, right, these are our panelists, and you can also see them. But so we're just going to go, I think we'll go in this order. But so we have Marian Liu, the Washington Post travel operations editor, and she uses analytics and digital journalism to engage audiences. And she also covers K-pop. And then my good friend Leah Uko, the co-anchor of Good Morning Charleston. And you may know her from Fox 11 News here in LA, which is where I first met her. We have Eder Diaz, a bilingual multimedia journalist. He's the creator of De Pueblo Católico y Gay. It's a great podcast if you speak Spanish. He's a CSUN lecturer. He was a producer for the Omar and Argelia show for many, many years on K-Love for Univision Radio. And then James Williams, he's a digital sports producer. So that's the order that I think we'll go in. So let me go ahead and stop sharing. And Marian, if you would share a little bit about yourself and how you got to where you are and what it is that you do.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marian. I just want to apologize ahead of time. I kind of have a sick cat in my lap, so if he starts going crazy, we see a black fur bouncing around. That's my cat. So I'm sorry about that. So I'm an operations editor at the Washington Post. We were just talking earlier that digital titles are strange these days. They don't always necessarily make sense. It could be producer, it could be even before it was like content management or social producer. They kind of all go in this weird bucket. A lot of us do all of the above, and then they don't know what to exactly. And then my cat just muted me. So it's very confusing. So as an operations editor, what I do is I make sure readers can find our stories. This goes to like how stories are headlined, to how you push them out on social. I work a lot with Instagram, with Twitter. I helped launch a new travel section called By the Way. I'll show you the site in a second. So you can see this is By the Way. And we just launched last June. So it was kind of a crazy time to launch travel amid coronavirus happening, but we pivoted really quick. So big part of my job is making sure, like, what are people searching now? What are people interested? And whatever that is, make sure we have a story to look at what's trending, and then make sure we call it optimizing the story. A little quick about how I got into journalism, and then I'll show you some stuff I've done. So basically, I got into journalism because, well, there's not very, as a minority and as a child of immigrants, it was really important to reflect my community. And what's hard about the Asian community is that we don't even talk about when something is good, more like defend when something is bad. So you saw the effects of that with Chinese flu, how many Asians got harassed, how, even people were thrown, got chemicals thrown at them. So it was very frustrating. So that's why I became a journalist in a nutshell. And at the very beginning, I wanted to write about people. I wanted to write about culture. So I was never a news reporter. I ended up going into and being a music critic. So I was a music critic in San Jose and then Seattle. Okay, that was random. For Source Magazine, and covered hip hop, especially local hip hop in the Bay Area. And from there, started writing a lot about my own community's music, about music coming in from Asia, from China, from Korea, from Japan, and started really early writing about K-pop and covering a lot of those groups. So I had interviewed BTS really early on. This was for CNN. I'd interviewed RM, Rap Monster. And had talked to them, had interviewed Shiny as well before one of their members had died, on help with the suicide coverage for that. So my career is, I started off in local newspapers covering like music, but I wanted to cover music in a different way. Like, of course, it's fun to write about the latest artists and how they're doing well, but I wanted to write about music and entertainment's impact on people. And of course, now you're seeing like it's how we connect to each other, it's how we understand each other. So I wanted to go deeper than just like, oh, this is what the latest hot person says about who he's dating. So this means story like one I did for the Washington Post about Black Lives Matter and about K-pop. Because yes, K-pop fans were amazing in that they were, you know, standing for Black Lives Matter, but K-pop, a lot of Asian pop, has a troubled history. In that there's a lot of racism, there's even blackface, there's, you know, cornrows, everything, which, you know, you can say start from emulation, but, you know, can be flat out racist. So talked about that, talked about how K-pop fans felt frustrated with something they love so much, because they did not feel like they belonged or were being heard. So that was my story. And then wrote about also about BTS and their branding, how smart they are. This was before they IPO'd, how crazy. And basically the person I talked to said, whatever they touch to turns into gold. So going deeper than like a regular profile, talking to marketing people, you know, people, they have a Barbie. And also they have a deck of Uno. So everybody was going in on it, like Uno cards. And then have been doing fun stories. Everybody around now has been quarantine baking, stress baking. So I was like, well, might as well get it expensed, get my materials expensed. So I've been baking for fun, like the rest of us, stress baking. And I wanted to, it's harder to get out, especially since I'm in Florida, to find my favorite snack, which is boba. So figured out how to make it on my own. And this became one of the top food stories for like the summer, actually, because it's also looking at communities that are not represented. And food journalism is one of those problematic things where it's hard to necessarily be authentic. So wanted to dive into that. And then really quickly at the very beginning, in addition to the travel coverage and like food and music for fun, I help out with a newsletter at the Washington Post called About Us. And it's about a newsletter that's about identity and race. And early on, people kept saying, oh, the protesters are diverse, you know, they're young, but we never had a story interviewing them. And even when we sent out surveys talking to readers, we never got diverse, you know, responses. So it was basically, you know, doing a survey on Twitter or whatever social media and finding people that actually reflected the protesters out there. So I was part of that. And then this, when I was, so I went from working at a newspaper I first started off in Santa. I think I've worked at 7 newspapers now. So I've worked in Oakland, I've worked in Detroit, I've worked in LA Times, and then went from San Jose after I graduated, went to Seattle Times, and then from Seattle went to a paper here in Florida. From Florida, went to CNN in Hong Kong. They cover a lot of Asian hip hop, and then came to DC to work for the Washington Post. And a story that I noticed and I had keeping tabs on before I left Hong Kong was, and this was happening here during the pandemic too, that how depression and anxiety is so much a part of our lives, given how everything is going on. And in Hong Kong, especially with like long work hours, tiny, you know, tiny houses, apartments to live in, and then no health coverage for any kind of, you know, counseling, depression, anxiety is high. So did this piece. And then the thing that you want to do for every story is actually interview who it's happening to. So I made a point to try to find somebody who has, you know, gone through this, and then end up interviewing 6 people actually. And then I'll just leave off on something fun. So what we try to do at the Washington Post is reach to all kinds of audiences. And part of that is we have a very popular TikTok. And I wanted to make sure that as part of our new travel section, that we got in on that new audience. So brainstormed and came up with ideas on how to basically combine our forces, like have the travel staff appear in our Washington Post TikToks. So we did a very fun one. How travel plays tag. So that's obviously pre-pandemic. Kind of, I wanted to show off of what, because we are travel, we're all about finding local places in whatever city. So wanted to show off like, fun places in DC, some that you know of, some that you might not. We did another one about airplane tips because there's the Naruto friend, like we're planes. And then we did one at the early pandemic. So just playing off trends that are online and also our own specialty and what we're known for. We had written stories about people who were simulating or doing virtual travel, and this is kind of like our take on it. So yeah, so that's everything about me in a nutshell.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And are you bilingual also?
Yeah, I speak Mandarin. So I've done some interviews. Like I did a piece for food, I guess more recently for food on mooncakes, and did like part of the interviews in Mandarin and did interviews in Hong Kong in Mandarin.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you. So if you want to stop the screen share for you, and then let's see here. Let's go ahead and bring up our next panelist, which is Leah Uko. So Leah, take it away. You might have to.
Hi, everyone. I think you can, okay, good. You can hear me. So it seems like during COVID, we always have to put disclaimers out there about what's going on in our homes before I am in my living room. I have to talk kind of low because my husband is in the other room working. And my bedtime is actually in 15 minutes, but obviously I'm staying up later. I'm the morning anchor currently here in Charleston, South Carolina, which means I wake up on a good day, 1:30, on a bad usual day, about 2 a.m., which means I go to bed around 5. And I'm 3 hours ahead of you all. So just to catch you up to speed on where I'm at right now. So I'm ready to, once I'm done answering questions and switching emails and everything, I'm going to jet and go to sleep. But yes, I was working in Los Angeles for 2.5 years. I left at the beginning of this year, pre-COVID. So I guess I'll talk about that because most of you either want to get into print, digital, but either way, you want to likely get into reporting of some form or fashion, whatever that medium is. So currently I am anchoring out here. I do report, but I do a little more special reports out here right now. Not a lot of day turn, daily grind, stories like that. So I'll talk about what I was doing in LA before I left. I was a general assignment reporter and fill-in weathercaster. I was reporting on any story that they were given for the day. That's what a general assignment reporter is. What makes it tough is you kind of have to be a little good at almost every topic because you don't know what you're going to get assigned for the day. So one of the biggest tips I could give anybody who's trying to get into any type of covering news in any form is build your contacts. Get active in the community and network as much as possible in whatever your style of networking is, because whatever story you're assigned for that day, you're going to need those contacts to help you piece together a story that you're going to broadcast to thousands of people who will be watching either at home or later when we post it online. I'll post some links, obviously, for the sake of time. You can't watch my work right now because we're in this Zoom discussion, but I'll post the links. I've made titles to them so that you all could see some of the stories I've done. So a little background on me. I knew I wanted to get into television news when I was about 8, maybe 7 years old. I watched a lot of local news in Los Angeles that kind of grasped my interest at a very young age. The death of Selena grasped my attention. I saw my neighbors, they loved Selena, and I didn't know much about her. I just know they had posters everywhere in their bedroom. And when she died, I remember they didn't come outside to play for like what felt at least a week or maybe 2. And their mom told me that they were mourning. And I was like, wow, they must be really sad that that lady died. So I remember when the movie came out, and I remember watching KTLA as a little girl and seeing how many people in the Mexican American community were so upset Jennifer Lopez, a Puerto Rican, was playing the role. They were protesting in the streets. They were talking to KTLA reporters. And I was like, whoa, they're mad about that same lady. And as a kid, I'm just kind of putting it 2 and 2 together. And it just seemed so exciting to be watching the morning news before going to school and seeing what was unfolding out there in the streets and putting the connection together that this was the woman that made my neighbors sad. And I started wondering, I wonder what my neighbors feel about this woman playing Selena. And that's kind of how I got hit with the journalism bug of wanting to talk to people about how they're feeling about stuff that's going on in the news today. I'll admit I am a very stereotypical TV broadcast journalist in a lot of ways, in the sense that I love to do this. I love to talk to the TV and I love to talk to people. I've got the gift of gab. That's what really made journalism cool to me, is that you got to just talk to people. You just got to just chop it up. I thought that was just so cool and so powerful to have access to people no matter where you go. And because you're a journalist, it's an honor to have. It's a responsibility to relay what they're telling you correctly. It's pressure, especially in today's day and age, to do it right, to convey people's feelings about what's going on today in a way that they can agree you did it right. So that's where my strength is at, is tapping into how people feel and putting it on the air so that people who don't relate to them can relate after they see my story. That's where my focus is. That's where my strength is. 2 other stories, and I'll speed it up, that got my attention was it's funny, ironically, 20 years ago, the George Bush election recount in Florida. I remember how pissed off my parents were when we were watching the evening news. Again, I'm a kid. I'm not really understanding what's going on, but I could put 2 and 2 together. They're mad this man is becoming president after what people say was cheating. And I remember no matter where my parents went, people were talking about it. Grocery store, bank, post office. It was like, my mom she's a talker too. So I just started noticing, like, man, whatever that lady Christine Devine, Channel 11, whatever she and John Beer say on the news, people talk about it the next day. Like, that's so cool. And I just thought that was cool. The last story that really got my interest was the death of JonBenet Ramsey. I did pageants as a little girl. She was the same age as me when she was killed. Her and the Princess Diana story, that was coming up in the era of 90s and early 2000 news, where you didn't just cover the facts, but you covered the feeling of news that got people talking for the rest of the day. That was my jam, was like, okay, the facts are a little girl was murdered, but nobody knows who did it. Another fact, the suspect's brother, mother, father, but nobody knows. And because of those little facts, people just couldn't stop talking. And now look, fast forward 20 years later, that's all news is about, right? You give people 2 facts and they spew and talk about it all day. So that brings me to what I did a lot at Fox 11. Of course, I covered the hard news, every day, just the nuts and bolts of whatever homicide was going on, car chase, wildfires was big, flooding. I covered all of that. But the stories that I really honed on when I had time to do my work was talkers, things that would represent communities that were underrepresented in news. Not in the sense that they weren't covering them, but they weren't covering everything about them. For instance, Black communities. I'm Black, so I'm always going to start with that community. We used to always be covered in a bad way. It was either when we were breaking the law or, complaining. It was never covering Black Americans like regular Americans. I'm as regular American as they get. Middle class, grew up in Palmdale, moved to the Valley, very uneventful middle class American life. Everybody in my network was the same way, and every time I watched news, it was only like, the Black people in the hood. And yeah, they're present, but like middle class Americans who are Black exist, and you just didn't see them covered normal. And if you did cover a normal middle class Black family, it was always told in the narrative like this was unique, and it's not. So that brings me to the first link I'll post down here. I did a story. It was actually the last story I did before I left Fox 11. It was an exclusive piece that I had no help getting, interviewing D Smoke, Inglewood Sir, and their brother Davion Ferris. If any of you are familiar with either of these artists, D Smoke won Rhythm and Flow on Netflix. It's like American Idol only for hip hop artists. He was the first winner. And sorry, I've got a lot of plants in my house and they're attracting a lot of gnats lately, and they're everywhere. And I don't know what's going on. And my plants are deteriorating before my eyes. But anyway, I spoke with them about their story. Yeah, they're famous. They're, a rapper, a singer, producers, but their story was so much bigger than that. First of all, you had 3 Black men who grew up in the hood. Gangbanging was so prevalent and none of them got into it. And their mother raised them on their own, and they all ended up becoming successful. Now, that is a unique story. You don't see that a lot in any family, that all 3 of the siblings grew up in a hard area and they all became successful musicians separately. Like they're not a group. So I told their story that was, instead of making an angle about, oh, they're famous, but more so like, how do you guys stay tight as you keep rising to fame? And they said that, they kept family close no matter what. They didn't let a lot of outsiders into their family. That's what kept them away from gang banging. And it's also what kept them close together as they rose to fame. I'll post that story. That's one of story I hold dear to my heart. One reason, because I got it exclusively with no help from our Good Day LA producers. It was more so my name that somebody told me about it. And I just kept badgering the publicist and just really just worked on getting in there and getting that story. And also just leaving Fox 11 on a high note, letting them remember, like, you need a Black reporter to tell these types of stories. We are seeing it this year, how important Black voices are needed in the newsroom. To tell the stories from a Black perspective is such a underrepresentation. It's not represented well in the newsroom. So I'll post that link. I'll post them all in order when I'm done. The second link I'll post is just a regular day turn about covering problems at good old LAX. No matter what market you go to, you're going to cover at least 1 or 2 stories at the airport. Airports are always full of stories because they're always developing, and any development at an airport affects almost everybody in your market, right? So it's always newsworthy. When LAX gave the boot to Uber and Lyft and taxis to have that new, the bus thing, that was a huge debacle when they first launched it. And we were there the first day. What I'm highlighting in this story is how to take a regular, boring kind of story and make it visually interesting. And in order to do that, I had to really collaborate with my photographer, the teamwork to work with a photographer. Instead of just doing the typical, like, oh, we're standing at LAX, the line is long, people are complaining, back to you. We took people through what it was like to actually get off a plane, get on that shuttle, get to the place to get on an Uber, how long it took, to really give people an idea, like, LAX is saying this is smooth. We're going to show you and you could be the judge. For some odd reason, that story went viral. I don't know why, but it went viral, and it was written very well, though. But I gotta credit my photographer for that, because he really turned a kind of visually boring story into something that could paint a good picture for people to see, and it also served our viewers to know, when you come through LAX, this is what you're going into.
Leia,
Yes.
how much extra planning did it take, to get inside the airport and do all that?
Good question. That because LAX wanted the publicity, no planning at all.
Mhm.
Did they get the publicity they thought they were going to get? No. But that took no planning. However, I think I can help you with the answer. For any market you go to, always get to know who the PIO, the media relations person is at the airport.
Right.
Because the second you bring your live truck, your camera of any kind on their property, they're going to come and tell you to get off. So you want to call them and let them know ahead of time, we're going to be there. Where can we set up that you won't kick us off, but we can do our job? So whenever we go to LAX, we call them ahead of time. LAX kind of has a good relationship with all media outlets, so it's not really pushback. But when I was in Omaha, there was always pushback. I mean, you could bring out a cell phone. They'd be like, get off, you didn't call. So just the planning in terms of that was just asking, where can all of media park? So we're not in the way, but we can do our job. And then two, we also had to be escorted onto that lot to know when we're not walking in the middle of the road because there's a lot of traffic. So it wasn't that hard. What took hard with planning that was the collaboration with the photographer. You know, like that one, it took longer to shoot rather than write. So I had to really write it fast so that he could take like probably an hour and a half to edit a 1.5-minute story. Usually if you give them 45 minutes, they can knock it out. We needed more than that.
Right. Okay,
Okay,
thank
so
you.
just so you know, because we have a couple other panelists too that we need to
Yeah.
hear from, but I will leave time at the end for all the students to ask questions too. But so Leah, do you have one more maybe you wanted to
Yeah,
share?
one more, and then I'm going to put out. So I'm going to post these 3 links. And the last one was the story I did on Nipsey Hussle when he was alive. Just another Black story that I think was really great being told from the Black perspective. You know, a couple of, non-Black reporters covered his story similar, but it wasn't from the same lens. It was like, ooh, look at this rapper. You know, he's not just a rapper. He also owns businesses. So I think what made Fox 11's story a little different was that we showed like why it was important for, when you get up out the hood, to put that money back instead of fleeing. That was what he really wanted to convey when he was alive. And when he died, his fans really took that message with him. He really guided a lot of his fans through his music about how to be an entrepreneur, how not to always depend on entities to uplift your communities. That's really what he stood for. And I thought that story really highlighted it really well. It went viral the first time for obvious reasons. It was Nipsey Hussle. It did go viral a second time after he died because we had a lot of viewers, especially Fox, a lot of white viewers who were like, who is this guy? Why do so many people care that he died? They started looking up that story and it really shined light. Again, the purpose why I got in the news, to bridge different communities through the gift of gab. So you got your OC community, your Santa Barbara, who was like, I don't care about this rapper. In come Leah to show you why so many people care. I like to educate people about what's going on in parts of their communities they normally wouldn't go to through the gift of gab. That's what makes me love television news. I'll post those links down there along with my email. Also, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm on all of those equally the same amount of days. So you can find me anyway.
Thank you so much. Thank you. All right, so Eder Diaz, you are up.
Hey everyone, thank you for joining us. And I'm so excited to be sharing this space with so many exciting professionals and to hear their stories. I geek out myself, so I'm having a blast listening to everyone. Interestingly enough, to Leah's story, my story as a journalist and broadcaster is also very tied to Selena, except my story is tied to radio. I heard that story as it was announced, leaving my elementary school, and my mom was listening to the radio to K-Love, which is the station that I was very fortunate to build a career in. And that's how I lived the news and lived the heartbreak of the Selena story. But that's also how I just became very aware of the power that radio had to their audiences. It's probably one of the earliest memories that I have to radio. Really quickly, I come from Jalisco, Mexico, center of Mexico, home of tequila and mariachi. You all know either of those. And I came to this country on and off as a child, for fragments of time. But definitely experienced the Southern California lifestyle at that age as an undocumented individual, working class family, and the two cultures coming back and forth to Mexico and to Southern California, and just really fell in love with storytelling. I collect old newspaper from breaking news newspaper first pages, like when Princess Diana died or when Selena passed away, stuff like that, stuff that I don't know, it would just catch my eye and I just wanted to hold on to it. So I think now that I look back on it, it makes sense that I pursued journalism, but I don't think I had a clue at the time what I was doing. I was just really passionate about what I was listening to and what I was hearing. I graduated from Cal State Northridge in 2008 with a bachelor's in broadcast journalism, a minor in Spanish language journalism, which is one of the only schools, I think to this day in this nation, that has a minor in Spanish language journalism. But it's very important, especially to the Southern California community, to be able to have a program and hopefully one day a bachelor's program. It's just so important to this market and to a lot of the communities that we serve in the US. I worked in radio for 14 to 15 years. Most of my career was at K-Love as on-air talent and morning show producer. So also to Leah's point, I know what it's like to, go to bed at odd times and wake up at odd times, but it's tough, but it's also beautiful. It's great to wake up with the city and to tell them everything that they need to know to start their day. So it's very gratifying. At the moment, I am dedicated to my podcast, which is the Pueblo Católico y Gay. And it's one of the very first Spanish language podcasts that spoke about what it's like to be queer and in the Latinx community. So it explores the intersectionalities between religion and queer, gender, and sexual identities. Currently pursuing my master's at Cal State Northridge, where I also am a part-time lecturer for the journalism department. And I will tell you where I work at right now. I didn't put it on the flyer because I can't tell you much about it. I'm just onboarding. But in September, I joined Facebook as a content curator. And, I would have had a little bit more experience by now, but because my, day is full with things, we delayed my onboarding to actually this week and next week, because now the semester is starting to wind down. So now I can take on the new job fully. So that's a little bit of me. Again, very excited to be here with you all and to hear what you all are interested in pursuing, and hopefully be able to answer some questions when we get there.
And our final panelist today is James. James, if you would introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yes, hi guys. My name is James. I work in the sports department for the Orange County Register and the Southern California News Group, which consists of like 11 different newspapers and websites, including the Orange County Register. And of course, that leaves me in charge of 11 different websites for when it comes to the sports tab that you guys would see on that page. A little bit about myself. First of all, I kind of found journalism like some of the other panelists who kind of found it at an early age. I didn't find journalism until like my third semester of community college. I started off at Cerritos College before transferring over to Riverside City College. I was on the newspaper at both, and I loved my time at those community colleges, and I would really express that you guys do the same. You don't have to love it, but make the most of your time while you're there. I think that I really, even to this day, I've done a few panels last month, and led to a lot of reflecting for me of wishing I was still at the community college level, just because there was a lot more opportunities for you to kind of do your own thing. You don't have like editors and stuff telling you what to do, but you can kind of just do what you want, test things out. And I think that's really how I kind of got the job I have now. I've only had one job in my entire life, and it's the job I have now, working for the Southern California News Group. I've never really applied for a job either. I got my job when I moved to Riverside. I just found all the sports editors and reporters on Facebook, added them, and never said a word to them. I just continued to do my own thing at community college and post my stories that I was doing, the work I was doing. And one day they just found me and they just said, "Hey kid, you want a job?" And I said, "Sure." I didn't know where it was at, how far it was, or anything. I wasn't driving at the time. I was kind of late bloomer to driving. But that wasn't going to stop me from getting that job and doing that job. So I would take the bus 2 hours every day after classes just to get down there. I think I was like sports editor of the community college paper too. But it's kind of like when you have an opportunity to get your foot in the door, you take it. So I wasn't going to wait till I had a degree to do that. I've had a lot of classmates that have done that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me, when an opportunity arises, I'm not going to wait for it. So I took that job, and while I was only hired to answer phones, I wasn't going to settle for answering phones. So what I would do when I'd answer, I'd get a lot of calls from coaches. I would write the scores down, their information, and then we would just put it in print and online. But the thing I wanted to do with all this information I collected for the day was I would go ahead and tweet it out and tag the high schools, tag the athletes, do different things like that. And obviously that helped my following, but two, it looked great in the eyes of my editor and his boss because it led to promotions and got me a full-time job to where I'm at now. So again, a lot of that was just kind of trial and error. No one told me to do anything other than answer phones. But I've seen a lot of people, especially when they get internships or whatever, who will just settle for doing what it is they're asked to do. So I would encourage you guys to please go a little above and beyond. I know sometimes that's kind of hard to do, especially when we have homework and essays and math classes. I hate math so much. So yeah, I mean, that's just a little bit about me. I went to community college, Cerritos College, Riverside City College, ended up transferring to Cal State Long Beach and actually just graduated last year, or I guess last year. Didn't get to walk because of COVID. But I got the degree in the mail and I'm happy with that. And I've been with the Southern California News Group for 7 years now. So pretty much all except maybe like 2 or 3 semesters of college, I've been working part-time or full-time. So it took me a little bit longer to finish my college career, but I don't really blame it on work. That's more so on the math classes, I think. But yeah, so again, if I'm you, I've been in your shoes, start looking now. And it doesn't have to be a full-time job or a part-time job, but an internship, an opportunity. Find things to start building your brand and making a name for yourself now. Because who knows where we're going to be? Who knows what platforms we're going to be on? Twitter was my go-to and still is my go-to. Just test things out. Be creative. Do different things, and don't wait for someone to tell you to do a story. Take it upon yourself to go out. If everyone has an iPhone or a cell phone with a camera, and do content, start creating content. It sounds maybe a little crazy to say, but when the Lakers and the Dodgers have parades, go to those parades, cover something, find a nice story where this father and son got to bond during the pandemic because dad doesn't have to go to work or can work from home, and the son has, is having school from home. They go out and they bonded and got closer because they shared these championship moments watching their favorite teams. Find those stories. You don't have to go and hope you interview a player or a coach. Stories. Obviously, with the election or with Black Lives Matter or all these other different protests, go out to those. Be safe, obviously, but use those as ways you can start building your resume now. Whether you're with your college newspaper. The first thing I did before anything else was I started my own WordPress. I still have it to this day. And again, pretty much kind of made a name for myself, because if no one's going to give me a job, if no one's going to take notice of me, then I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait for anyone to take notice of me. I'm going to give them a reason to take notice of me. So start building your brand now. Do it on social media. Keep it clean as much as possible. A lot of times people will ask me, do you have a personal account and a professional account? No, I don't. And the main reason for that is because I don't have any secrets. I don't have anything to hide. I'm proud of every decision and everything that I do. And that doesn't mean you have to just have one profile. You could have two, but I just don't post that I'm getting drunk or that I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Keep it clean and think about you as a teacher too. Obviously, we want to have fun in college, but an hour from now, are we going to care that you were drunk? No. It says my connection is unstable. Can you guys still hear me and stuff?
We can hear
Sharon,
you.
if you want to let me know if I still sound good.
Well, we can still hear
Sharon, are
you.
you there?
Yeah, I can hear you, but I can't see you. But and then it has
Okay.
been coming in and out. But
Hey,
if
you don't need to see.
if you turn your screen off too, sometimes the audio comes through better. But I think let's open it up to, okay, so now we can see
Yeah.
you again. But so now let's open it up to questions. So for the students who are here, you can type your question in the chat, or you can turn on your camera and ask your question. And you can ask the question of any of the panelists or all of the panelists. So be brave and ask your questions. And then if there's no questions, then I'll ask questions.
I'll go. This question's for James.
Hey, Michael, how are you?
Good, you?
Doing well.
You said you had a wrestling podcast, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you need any guests for that?
I'm sure we'd love to have you on one day if you want to talk wrestling. That's fine. But
Okay.
and again, so that's even another example of like if you find an opportunity just like that. Hey, can I join your show? Can I join your podcast? Man, love to have you on.
Thank you.
And did you have anything else for that question? Or sorry to kind of cut you off there.
Do you work in wrestling at all, or is that just like a side job that you do?
So yeah, it's just like a side thing. So for me, again, and this goes for everybody, find something that you're passionate about and kind of apply that to what you're doing and covering. I mean, you can get stuck doing the hard news stuff, or you can find your own kind of way. So for me, that's kind of esports and video games or pro wrestling. So for me, I didn't really grow up watching sports, even though I'm in the sports department. I grew up watching pro wrestling. For me, I kind of just took that on as a side project. Some of my buddies have a college radio station at Long Beach State, and I just hopped on with them and said, why not? Let's create content and let's make it happen. So yeah.
Awesome.
Anyone else?
There's a question in the chat about whether newspaper websites take stories from freelancers and who's the best person to contact with your story. Do you have any advice for this person?
I'll answer. It depends. Like not a very straightforward answer. It depends on the story. It depends on your connections. It depends on the kind of story and then the kind of section. And also what stories you've done before. What I usually tell students is you're in this wonderful place because newspapers, media companies want to reach you as readers, and stories, things better than we do. Like TikTok better than the Post does. So this world. So you want to make sure that because it's a whole craft in itself, how to pitch a story. The main question for the story is why you? Why is it you that are the best person to write this? What do you know about this community that other people might not know? And then it's trying to figure out who it's best to contact. So whatever organization that it is, it's basically finding out who is in control of that section, who are the daily writers, pay attention to the media. The worst thing that you can ask a media company, or the worst thing you can suggest, is why don't you cover this? And they did that day. So you want to pay attention to what they're covering and their style, and as if they would even cover it. Because obviously there's things that a TV station would cover that the Post wouldn't. We might tend to be more conservative on things, but we might be more conservative on things, but you just want to switch your angle a little bit to see how you might want to cover it. So pay attention to how stories are covered, how they are written, and then maybe reach out to the writer, look at the staff lists So yes and no. So it's basically kind of like a detective game. And I would encourage you to, reach out to writers. You have my email too. And we're always looking for stories on race as well, race and identity, and stuff like that. So long answer to your question.
I would say too, there's some networking groups. So like Marianne Liu is very active with the Online News Association, right? And then there's like the National Association of Black Journalists, the LA chapter, NAHJ has a California chapter. So does Latino Journalists of California. There's the Society of Professional Journalists. There's all these different organizations that are out there that are like networking groups for journalists. And that's a great way to meet people in the industries that you want to go into, because it really is an industry where networking is so important. All right, other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, I guess this is to the entire panel. I don't know, like what's sort of the pipeline right now from like sort of journalism graduates from like four-year schools to like the journalism market? Like are there too many like new young journalists? Are there not enough? Like what's the demand like right now?
I could answer a little bit. That's a great question. For television, the pipeline 4-year degree is usually preferred. However, I have heard of people, especially if they're from smaller markets, who don't have degrees and they got into the news station, working, behind the scenes, and they work their way up. But typically, usually, stations always want to know where you went to school. And you usually start in a very small market, be willing to move. This is something I have to really stress when I talk to students in LA, because a lot of them are afraid to move for whatever reasons. And especially, I can only speak to TV. You got to move to a small market. You're not going to start in LA unless you're doing like an entry level job. But say you want to be a reporter, or you want to be a photographer, or you want to be a producer, an editor, an anchor, any position, you have to go to a small market. There are a lot of reasons for that. The main reason being you can learn how to do the job in a less intense market. And also there's less on the line if you mess up. People are a little more forgiving when you're in really small markets, as opposed to the bigger the market, the more eyeballs on you, the more there's at stake. But really, it's just so that you can learn how to do the job without the pressure of the big market and the monster of breaking news always happening, and having to think quick on your feet, having to know. You want to be able to learn all that in a smaller market. Now, let me update that answer a little bit. Mm-hmm. There are stations now who are hiring reporters straight out of college in LA. Personally, I highly do not recommend taking those jobs. That's straight from a working journalist. I would say, like, don't do it. They don't pay squat, and you're not really a main reporter on. It's more like you're doing feature stories that usually go straight to the web, or you have a beat that's like not really going into the broadcast. You're like a supplemental role. So while it may be cool to be like, oh, I'm 22 years old working in LA, those positions are paying at most 50, maybe 55. In LA, that's not a livable wage. Now, sure, in a small market, that's different. But yeah, and you're also not getting the experience to be in the field as a reporter, because you're doing stories that really aren't deadline driven. You're not live reporting. So you're in a big market and you're not getting live experience. That's huge, because in the big markets, you're doing live reporting every day, multiple times a day. These are more like pre-recorded stories that they put in a can. Right. So I do not suggest taking those jobs. I know they're offering it, but don't take them. Let them figure that out on their own.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think too. So that's a good point. And like I took a broadcasting class as well, and I was at Cal State Long Beach, and that was one of the things they stressed, and I really took away from it, is like you have to go to Ohio, maybe not Ohio, but like Idaho.
Yeah, you do. Ohio.
Or,
yeah.
some of the smaller markets in Arizona, I heard. But for newspaper, yeah, right, right. Is Ohio a small market? I guess it would, or some of the markets in Ohio, I guess. So for newspapers, I mean, I guess it can kind of be one or two ways. I've had sports editors from a paper up in the valley that has said, "Hey, do you know anyone from a who just got a degree? We're just looking again for an entry level job. We're looking to hire somebody." And I did recommend somebody, and they actually said no because they didn't want to drive an hour to take the job. Which I would think if you just get a degree that you would want. But again, everyone's situation is different. But whether that means you're up and moving out of the state or you have an hour drive or much like myself, have to take a 2-hour bus drive when you're first starting out, you're going to have to make a sacrifice at some point. Expect to get that ball rolling for you. So don't be afraid to make a sacrifice, even if it's as I like to think as small as taking a 2-hour bus ride.
Right. Are even like the small, like, I don't know.
Anybody else?
Oh,
I want to make sure everybody who wants to ask a question gets a chance to, just so you know. All right, go ahead, Asia.
Hi. Yeah, I kind of have a question to bounce off of Vincent to follow up on it. So I actually have a bachelor's degree, and I've been coming to Santa Monica College and just really been enjoying the classes and learning about journalism and just kind of getting a taste for it. But I really can see myself transitioning into that career path, working in front of the camera. So I just wanted to hear your opinion on students who may have work experience and may have finished a bachelor's degree and are interested in transitioning. What are your recommendations for making that transition? Do you recommend possibly master's program, or kind of just like staying to the path of taking classes and building up your own skill set through your own experiences?
I guess that's probably a question for, you said in front of the camera. I'll also quickly answer. A while ago, Boone Wilder wrote a question in the chat too. So I see your question. To make the transition, if you've already gotten your bachelor's degree, but you said you're still enrolled at Santa Monica College?
Yeah, I'm enrolled in a class at Santa Monica.
Okay, that's good. Pre-COVID, being still a student, you could take an internship at a TV station. That was how I had to build my resume tape. I went to UC Riverside, great school, not for journalism though. Like, just, not good at all.
I'm in Riverside too, and I had to go to Live to make the commute to Long Beach for that. So
yeah, I had to drive rush hour from Riverside to Burbank, and then so that's a whole nother conversation.
Yes,
but I would ask reporters, at the time, like, hey, if I follow you in my own car, can I go out with you guys to shoot these stories? And then when you're done, can I get in front of the camera and shoot a stand-up? That was how I had to build my reel. It was terrible. I had to learn everything from following, shadowing Beverly White. So, you know how big LA is. I would have to get in my personal car. We would drive all the way to Palmdale because of I remember a kid drowned somewhere. And then in the middle of the story, they changed and made them go back to LA. And Beverly forgot I was following them and forgot to text me. So I went to the restroom, I came back and they were gone. Like, I was driving all around in my own personal car, my own gas money in 2008. Okay. Where gas was more than $5. And that was how I had to build my reels. So the reason why I say that is if you are still a student, they could technically enroll you in an internship that way because you would use your college credits because, they don't pay for interns in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So that is still a pipeline. It's still, I will say I had a couple of students ask me how they could get internships right now. I do know a lot of stations aren't taking interns right now because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I will reach out to a couple of news directors I'm still in contact with and ask, like, what are they doing?
Mhm.
And I'll let Sharon know about that. But yeah, that's the way. If you want to make that transition, you got to get in front of that camera.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think
I do.
too, before you answer Boone's question, I think so. Be open-minded to doing a little bit of everything. Learn how to take your own photos. Learn how to be in front of the camera. Learn how to write your own stories or your own script for camera. Learn social media. Learn a different platform you don't know. Try different things. Be open to everything, because you may be asked to do something may not be comfortable doing. So try and learn a little bit of everything, because you never know when it'll come in handy.
Yeah, and to answer the question, yeah, Boone, you were answering. Sorry, let me scroll up. Yeah, Boone Wilder's question, correct? So this person asked, since you were a general reporter and covered all kinds of things, I assume there were things that you may have had strong feelings about. How do you temper your personal feelings to cover a story objectively? To answer that question, very good question, very popular question. My co-anchor right now answered it in a very good way, a good way. He said, he wasn't trying to give advice, but he did. He was like, it's just like the military. You don't say your thoughts on the assignment. When you're called to go cover it, you go do it. That's your duty. I kind of think that mindset is very traditional, and as much as media is changing, I think that still stands. Social media will have a lot of journalists out here thinking it is normal to share what you think about every story. It is not. And I cannot stress that enough. You get online and it seems like all journalists are sharing it, but this is something that I've really been looking into a lot lately. The more social media just continues to explode, you got to think about it like this. I'm now in South Carolina, Charleston. Like literally, slaves got to this country first from Charleston. This area is uber conservative. And, I think about every time, my following thinks like me. They look like me. They rock with my views. But then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, I get the mayor of Charleston follows me on Instagram. Now all of a sudden, I'm like, "Oh, will he relate to that video I was, the trap song I was playing in my IG stories at 3 a.m. when I pulled up to the station?" I always keep it professional. My general manager follows me, but I do have to think about those little things. Like, it may not be making your credibility questionable, but it does put you in a box. And today's world, we are very divided. I think sharing anything that you like, people will put you in a box. If you say you are happy as a Black woman to see Kamala Harris be, it's blah, blah, blah. Nobody cares as a Black woman journalist how you feel that you're showing your bias. And so I do think, I think it's best just to keep what makes you happy offline. So therefore, the same rule applies to keep what makes you mad. When you go cover an assignment, treat it like military. You're assigned to go do your job, go do it. I stand by that, and I think I cannot stress enough. Don't let social media think it is normal for journalists to just be saying how they feel, because you do, outside of your network, outside of your algorithm, you do have people who are following you, and that will come in handy one day when you need to go interview, a politician, or just a business owner. When I talk about, Black Lives Matter, and then I need to bring a restaurant owner who's a part of city council on our show, and Black Lives Matter ruined, the protests ruined their store, and now they know how I think. It's a slippery slope.
I'm curious
Yeah.
to ask Eder about this in Spanish language media, and then I want to make sure we have time. We have an alum with us, and I want to make sure we have time for her question too. So go ahead, Eder.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a great discussion. I think, the first thing that you do need to know, obviously, is what your newsroom requires of you. Ultimately, you want to have a job, and you want to be successful at that job, and you want to progress in your career. So that's the first thing. However, I do teach Spanish language journalism. I teach a course in the Spanish language journalism program at Northridge called Spanish Language News Environment. And I always encourage my students to bring their full selves, always, and never be afraid of that. Whatever that means, you'll get experience out of whatever you're bringing to the table, but it'll be more, you will get more out of every experience if you are unafraid and you bring your full self than if you sort of censor yourself. And I think, when we talk about marginalized communities in the newsroom, there has been historically a systemic oppression as well from media, from newsrooms. So when we really have open conversations of what being objective means, it was taught down to us by academia and by newsrooms that were also really systemically racist.
Right.
So I think it's a perfect time, the LA Times, I think it's leading the way in this narrative with the Latino caucus and the Black caucus this summer, really restructuring how we approach the news from, communities that are seen as marginalized. And now the National Association of Hispanic Broadcasters pushing for newsrooms to drop the word minority because it adds to the narratives, right? So be confident in bringing your full selves. But, Leah's right. You also, at the end of the day, have to be very aware of how you're presenting yourself and the newsroom that you are working in, 100%.
Yeah, and to clarify, yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to say. Like, they could assume, well, a Black woman with dreadlocks on the news is happy to see Kamala Harris be, but it's one of those, like, why does it matter? You just have to know, like, being fair doesn't mean, like, just because I'm in Charleston doesn't mean, I suppress my Blackness, but it's one of those, like, is it relevant? You have to know when your perspective is relevant and when it's like, are you just trying to insert yourself in the story? Does it, at the end of the day, you always want to make sure what you're covering, does it serve the people who are watching? Are you holding, also your bias could be a disservice in the sense that you're holding back questions. You know what I mean? Just always keep, like, I want to cover this story fairly. And so, but I guess to boil down also, how do you just really, like, not get mad or, stories that you don't like, you just treat it like, yeah, it's the job, and that's a part of being a journalist, is being able to handle people with crazy views and still crank out that story in the most fairly way. And sometimes, like you said, calling out institutional, bias is still, that's fair. Challenging what you're taught because that was told by a white ideal, that is fair. That still falls along the line of being fair. So it's hard. You'll learn along the way.
So,
but at both, protect the bag. Don't ever let your subjectivity ruin your job.
I'm very excited. So we have with us one of the SMC alumni who has gone into broadcast journalism, and she has a question for the panelists as well. So go ahead and take it away if you would.
Hi, can you guys hear me? You can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, cool. All right. Okay, I'm sorry that the lighting is bad. So I have a question. I guess it's probably for Leah and probably a little bit of Marian, since you do a lot of different types of stories and the type of stories that you would like to do. But I have a question. I've been in the business for several years now, six and a half years, television. I moved from LA out to Delaware, Delmarva area, which is very conservative. Yeah. Oh, you know,
you moved. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah. So and so I've been out here ever since. And so so I was in the Delmarva area, and then eventually went to New York, which is where I am now. And I've worked for small stations. I've never worked for a large media company. I've never had any real consistency in terms of I guess job security, because I've faced a couple of layoffs. There were mergers And one of my stations last year in New York actually just shut down. And so like right now I'm kind of just, I've gone back and forth between different roles. Was a reporter mostly, then did like lifestyle entertainment work, then did traffic. So there's a lot in the mix. But I have a voice and I've got a perspective, and my thing is just that, what do you do when you are in a rut? You know who you are, you know what your voice is, you know what the things you care about, and you know how to eloquently talk about those things. But you're just not into the daily grind of just local news anymore. You're not into the murders and the construction stories and this and that. You want to get something more out of the skills that you've been able to do. And I've been in MMJ for most of my career, so I know how to do a lot of it, do it all. But I'm just kind of in a rut, and I've, ever since I lost my job last year, and I've just kind of been freelancing here and there. So it's just been hard with, I guess, with my collective experience of sort of kind of having a little bit of everything in the kitchen sink, and not really having that attachment to any kind of big media company where maybe I could have moved within those places, those companies, and just picked up somewhere else and gone off. What do you do when you're in a rut, if you guys have ever been there and you're looking for something more? I know this is like a deeper question, but if anybody can speak to that, that would be nice.
Well, I think that you're not alone at all, especially as a woman of color. Just remember that. And you're especially not alone in journalism. I've been laid off before, so many of us have. A large part of the AJ convention was just this like rant session where we all talked about all the bad stuff that's happened to us, all the bad stories, all the people you looked up to that were like, you can't make it in this business. But hey, I'm still here, you know? And I think it's a lot about believing that you can do it. I think that it's almost making sometimes a rally for yourself. A rally for me has been the same outcry that's been kind of the slogan of the Hong Kong protests, which is Jayo. It is like add more oil, basically put the pedal to the metal. And just know that you're going to have good and bad days, a lot of times more bad. My brother, who was also a writer, has said that like journalism is like the ex that doesn't love you back.
Yeah.
So it's a very horrible,
Man.
tough business.
That's
And
cool.
you'll always be chewed up and then spit out. Just
That is
know
cool.
that. And most of us don't have the benefit of being in a big company that will grow you. Most of us, it's only the minority that will have a boss that looks out for you.
Right.
That's the minority. Most of us are having a tough time. So I think the biggest thing is like, check into NABJ, to all the different journalism associations. There's another one that's called Journalists of Color on Slack. Check in with them. They're wonderful. I'll put the link on later to chat. Just because they have Slack rooms to rant and also to like give accolades, like wins and losses. And it's just nice to be able to talk it out.
Right.
And just
Thank
know
you.
that you're not alone. You now know some more mentors, possibly. You have your fellow students. And it is a tough road, but like, my fellow panelists have talked about, it's also a very rewarding one. I mean, we're in this weird time in our country where it's even more important to represent as a person of color, to represent our communities, to have our voices be heard. And also like, there's so many women that might be in the government soon, and to like talk about their voices and you said you already know like where your voice is, what your community is. And that's like the biggest part of the battle as a writer. So if you already have that down, I think you'll be fine. Just know that we're all looking out for each other. So you don't need to worry.
Thank you.
Oh, one thing just to add, how long you been in business?
6.5 years now.
One thing I add that's completely different that also could help you. This is more like an old fatherly advice is you may for now have to cover car crashes and homicides. That is, that's the day's news, and that is the bread and butter until you can find a niche and do the meat. Like there's a sports guy I know who says no matter what in sports, I'm always stay employed because I'm not afraid of covering a car crash. He always says that. news, the daily news is always going to need a body to cover it. So right now, maybe this is the stage of life I'm in right now. I'm a little bit of doing the stories I want, but also securing the bag. You
Right.
know, like this pandemic has shown that we all should be just grateful to be employed anywhere. So if that means I have to read, stories in Charleston that I'm like, child, how is this getting on the air? Like, this is barbaric, Listen, right now it's about again, military style. It's not about what I like. Right now, maybe this part of your career is not about serving the stories you want to do. Maybe it's also like wherever your employer goes, if that's the stories they want covered right now, keep learning the ropes. What does that do? What you got to do until you can do what you want to do.
Yep.
So the stories that I told you I covered, I've got like 7 of those from LA. I was in LA for 2.5 years. The rest of those were wildfires. It's raining. There's a police chase. I wasn't doing D-Smoke stories every day.
Yeah.
That was my last story. I literally aired that the night before I walked out of that station. So sometimes it's about like, again, back to social media and we're all creatives. We all want to do those stories we want and be the voice of our people. But also it's like, right now, your people are whoever your viewers are. So I'm not in a rut, but I'm in that little position of like, I know the stories I want to do, but I got a news director who's like, honey, this is in LA. We don't care about what you want to do. And it's like, she's kind of right. So you take, like Mary was saying, sometimes you have some wins, but you have a lot of loss and a lot of bad days more, but it makes the good ones so much more rewarding when they come. You know what I mean? It's,
Yeah.
You got to really love this business to laugh at how depressing it could be.
Yes.
So we're just about out of time. We have a few panelists who need to go. Eder wanted to respond to that question too.
I was thinking he would have, yeah.
Yeah, and then if we can't get your question answered, you can definitely, I'll put my email in the chat. You can email me your question. I'll send it out to the panelists, or some of the panelists have put their Twitters. If those are the panelists who are willing to answer follow-up questions from students via Twitter or something, you can put your Twitter handles in the chat. But I want to make sure we respect everyone's time, and Leah's up past her bedtime, so I appreciate that too. So Eder, you had a response, and then I think you needed to go.
Yeah, it's nothing you haven't heard yet, but I really want to stress the networking part of the job, and also the keeping in touch with your professors. Leah is so correct in saying that the bad days largely outweigh the good days, but I can't even tell you how many times I literally wanted to quit my career. And, I felt stuck. I felt like I wasn't growing. Sharon can definitely vouch for me. Sharon was my first journalism professor I ever had in my life. I've always reached out to her. Sometimes it was a morning text. Sometimes it was a long email. It was always like, I don't know what I'm doing and I don't know where I'm going. And they're always really able to see the bigger picture that sometimes you can't see because you're stuck in your day-to-day. Sometimes the advice is stay longer. Sometimes the advice is maybe it's time to consider a master's, which it came to me and I did. Sometimes the advice is maybe it's time for you to move and have a little faith in yourself, but sometimes it's hard to make that decision on your own. So networking and keeping in touch with your professors, people that know your career, people that you trust, it's so valuable. And keeping in touch with your classmates, we bounce around. One day we're here, the next day we're there. One day the person that I worked for, I may be their boss and be able to give them an opportunity, or vice versa. We all know that this does become a really small industry, down the road. So you end up knowing a lot of people, and, just hang on to those networking things. Networking is always the part of the job that I hate.
Yeah.
But it always proves me wrong. It always, it's so true. You do have to do it. You have to be nice to people. It just,
Yeah.
it's a little exhausting, but it pays off.
Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
You'll be good, girl. And I've been in 3
good.
ruts. So you'll be fine.
Thank you.
Wait,
So-
4.
So I want to appreciate all of the students who came out, and I hope the students, and you can turn on your cameras if you want to, but I would encourage you to give a round of applause to our fabulous panelists. It's been, I could talk to you all day, so thank you so much, all the panelists.
I have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. I wanted to talk to Eddie. Eddie.
Oh, Eder?
Yeah.
So he had to go at 3:30, but he put his contact info in the chat.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah, so he was able to stay for like a couple more minutes, but I think he had a Facebook meeting.
Okay.
But yes, definitely follow up. These are wonderful professionals who are volunteering their time, right, to help us and to talk about the future of journalism. So I really appreciate all of you for joining us. I'll stick around for a couple minutes in case anyone has questions about SMC's journalism program. I know the Career Services Center put in the chat some links if you're interested in learning more about how to get an internship or how to do an internship through SMC. We have the Corsair Student Newsroom, which is Journalism 16, which also provides a lot of great opportunities for students. But again, thank you everyone. Thank you panelists, thank you students, thank you everyone for a super successful panel discussion. I'll stick around for a few minutes. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us and I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you. Thanks, Sharon.
Thank you.